college is probably one of the most stressful times of your life, but it's the most fun because you learn how to cope with stress through, certain activities. Like,
there were times when I sacrificed my own happiness in an attempt to make someone else happy. And like it did me, it can drain you and leave you with nothing.
I like when I figure out that I'm the problem in a situation, because that means that I can fix that. I can change something that I'm doing wrong. But
as stated on a previous episode by Desmond,
and I feel like just about everybody that I've known has gone through a midlife crisis at 23.
Our early 20s are amongst the most trying times of our lives as we look to solidify our place in the world as adults. On this week's episode of the Infusion Breakdown Show, the season 3 premiere might I add, the Infusion Breakdown Show, we sat down amongst ourselves to discuss this topic and talk about the biggest lessons our early 20s taught us. Let's see what we come up with.
Before we get started into this episode, I'd like to introduce to you our Black-owned Business of the Week, where we showcase quality Black-owned businesses for you to support every week. This week's business is Yaya by Matthew Pierce. Yaya stands for Your Idea is Amazing and is a multimedia consortium that specializes in designs, including but not limited to artwork, apparel, animation, and just about anything else you can think of. Matt's artwork is frequently on display at shows throughout the 757, so be sure to check some out. Additionally, if you're interested in apparel, check out the link in his bio on IG.
So the question we have for today, what has your early 20s taught you? Comment below, let us know.
all right, so I think I'm gonna take a stab at it first. Just a little background, I guess, on this question because it's our first one back since our little hiatus. It was an idea that I kind of pitched 2 weeks before a week before our last episode, because I thought it was kind of like be more impactful in the sense of what I think a lot of us could relate to, with us being in our, or I think, a bunch of our avid listeners being in their 20s. But I think the most important lesson that I've learned in my early 20s is the importance in finding yourself as an individual. It sounds very, very simple, but I think it's a thing that a lot of people struggle with. Case in point for myself is that I remember, being or feeling like I was misunderstood in my, late teens, and then, to the probably first 3 years of my 20s. I remember just feeling like I didn't resonate with people well. And I felt like I didn't really resonate with people well is because what I had thought that I had loved and liked, throughout my late teens was just a fact, or more or less a facade of like things that I had took from pop culture and kind of like were really good at. Case in point was, I had a deep love for, shoes. So I had a whole bunch of Jordans. I had a deep love for streetwear. So I have, Supreme, BBC, Stussy, this is all stuff early 2010s when it's kind of like at its peak of, prime creativity. And I kind of realized that like, as you get into your 20s, shit is just tangible. Like it doesn't hold any true value. So when things that doesn't have like any intrinsic value in itself, and not to say it doesn't have value, because there's a lot of people that have taken streetwear and, build, their base and their foundation off of it. But for me, it wasn't something like I didn't have that creative urge to just be somebody within the streetwear realm. I just really, really enjoyed it. But it was kind of like a thing to where I identified myself with what I enjoyed rather than identifying myself as a person first, and then understanding the rest was just tangibles. Like when you thought of Dez, you thought of, Jordans, you thought of what he wore. Like that's how I kind of identified myself as, not really as Dez as the, now very, very thoughtful, insightful, wise, very, very competitive. Like those weren't things that I would describe myself as before. So bringing everything full circle, the reason why I think it's so important to, really know who you are as a person within your, or I would say expediting it within your 20s, because when you know who you are as a person, you're able to set boundaries. When you don't really know who you are as a person, you can think you're setting boundaries, but you'll find that those boundaries aren't in any correlation to what your, true self really believes in. So you find yourself really crossing and breaking those boundaries really easy. When you truly know who you are, you're able to say, okay, this is what I'm not going to allow, whether it be relationships, whether it be friendships, whether it be parental relationships and friendships. You're able to say, like, I am 100% okay with stating my piece, and if somebody agrees with it, cool. If they don't, oh well. Like that's the level of comfort you want. Because I can recall just through my, through my early 20s, it was always just, I want to make my mom proud. I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna make my mom proud. And I still have that. But I now know that whatever it is that I choose to do is going to make her proud regardless. It's kind of like I want to make my friends proud. Like I want to be that friend that has all the money, all the boys come over, and everybody. That would be my sense of like I made it. Like I can have everybody, bringing everybody into one. And that's still a goal, but it's like I want that to be a goal, or a goal that I achieve as a result of my own hard work. It's like that's just the byproduct of my determination, not literally my reason of determination per se. So, I think what really clicked for me was just when I battled with my depression, and I had, had quite a few stints in my late teens, and then got into my 20s. It became really bad because I was just, crippling myself. I wasn't very, I was more reactive than I was proactive. And then I got to a point where like I had already had my son, and I just kind of, everything just clicked. It was that thought to where I can either look back on this period of my life, this short period of my life that spans only 3 or 4 years, and just think like, damn, this is the reason why I wasn't successful. Or I could look back on this 3 to 4 period and this be the booklet or the template that I could provide to somebody else that's going through those same trials and tribulations within their 20s.
Why do you think early on you identified so strong with your possessions and ascribed them as personality traits?
I think it doesn't just extend like, because my example was high school or just like the whole social thing. For me, I went to a predominantly all Black middle school, and like in that realm of things, everybody played basketball. Me being me, like I grew up around a lot of white kids in my younger years, so I preferred soccer and baseball. Like I was really good at both. But because I went to an all Black school, or predominantly all Black schools, like I resonated really well with my Black friends, but like none of them played the stuff that I truly like enjoyed. Like I was really big into Star Wars. Not a lot of the Black community really appreciated Star Wars in the early 2000s. Like I was really good in soccer and baseball just because I was an extremely fast kid when I was young. Not a lot of Black kids were like playing soccer and baseball into their middle school years. That's when everybody transitioned to basketball. So at a very young age, I started compromising on things that like I truly love to kind of like be accepted and to be introduced to these inner circles based off of like sport. So it started really younger for me. Like now that I'm looking back on it, where like me compromising wasn't really more or less like a 50-50. It was like me compromising myself for acceptance instead of compromising myself to find some sort of resolution. So I specifically say that because it was acceptance. It was how people, I guess you could say for me, it's like kind of like the social dilemma before the social dilemma. Like you see people post on Instagram now to, get those likes and to get that dopamine hit. For me, my dopamine hit was when I like had a fresh pair of shoes and I came in the next day and everybody's complimenting on it.
So you was getting real-time likes as opposed to just double taps?
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
Mine kind of ties into that a little bit. What I learned the most in my early 20s is like put my own happiness before others, because if my happiness is dependent on how happy other people are, then I would never be happy, basically. And because there were times when I sacrificed my own happiness in an attempt to make someone else happy, and like it did me, it can drain you and leave you with nothing if your happiness for that person doesn't line up with their own. And no matter how much you want to, you can't control someone's happiness, because one day they could wake up and decide that something or someone else makes them more happier than you anyway. So it taught me, really early 20s mainly just taught me to put my own happiness first, which allows me to become the best version of myself, I feel. And it's kind of what Desmond was talking about too, kind of that like the dopamine hit. Not that I kind of got off not with the bragging about what I had or anything like that. I kind of got off at seeing other people happy. But of course, when that didn't translate to me, that's when it caused problems. So I wasn't focused on myself more. So I had to basically turn it over and focus more on myself. And that's how I become the best version of myself.
So you were relying on that as a means of self-validation, to where if you
Yeah.
make someone else happy, then you felt good about yourself.
Yeah,
And that's what you were basing your value off of.
exactly. Yeah.
That's kind of why I kind of tied in boundaries, because I think like happiness is a byproduct of boundaries, and staying firm with those boundaries. Like when you stay firm with your boundaries, people aren't able to infiltrate things that make you happy. Like for me, what Josh said was perfect. Like relationships was my Achilles heel in my early 20s. Like I identified with the relationship, so I didn't really have a true definition of self. So if you already tie in the lack of self, and you kind of knowing what you want out of life, or not necessarily out of life, but what you want for yourself and where you see yourself headed, in conjunction with identifying your true self, or what you perceive to be your true self with the relationship, like it was just a concoction of things put together that was inherently built to fail from the beginning.
I was going to ask, what are your thoughts on Desmond's statement that happiness is a byproduct of boundaries? Because I don't think a lot of people view it that way.
You don't? I think that's accurate.
No, I didn't say I didn't.
Oh, yeah, no, I think that's accurate. I do think that if you have strong boundaries and you know what you want to affect you, what you want not to affect you, then you should be able to definitely withstand all of that, I would say, or any distractions that could come up that could interfere with your happiness.
I think it's super true, because I was speaking with one of my friends earlier, and we were talking about boundaries or something of a very similar nature. And a lot of people, they'll excuse behaviors in the beginning of any kind of interaction or relationship because they don't want to come across as being too overbearing, or they don't want to have like a negative connotation to it. But in reality, something that's going to bother you in the long term, so it's better to address it up front. And so by putting off something in the immediate future, yeah, you delayed the inevitable. Like, it's going to happen, it's going to piss you off worse, or possibly down the line it could cause bigger problems. So you can't really get rid of a boundary unless it's easier to address things that are going against the boundary than it is for you to just overhaul them completely, because they're things that are like really internal to us, like the need for personal space, for example. That's not something that you could easily undo and say, okay, like myself, I'm somebody who needs a lot of personal space. Like, I don't need somebody over top of me 24/7. I hate that. And I really can't tell you how exactly I would go about eliminating that. I just feel like that's just something that's just so internal to me that it's an absolute need. So I thought really long and hard about this. When Desmond first asked this before we took our hiatus, I was thinking about the acceptance of loss, and just I kind of spoke on that a little bit on episode 48. So I don't want to just take a cop-out answer and go with something along those lines. But I did think about the fact that we don't have as much time as we think we do. And it sounds super cliche, as just about everything is, but when you really live it and experience it, it's totally different. So like myself, I turned 25 years this year. That's a quarter of a century. And then I'll look at the things that I've done. Like all of us at least have a Bachelor's of Sciences, a bachelor's degree from Old Dominion University, and then we have Josh with your higher education than that. I mean, that's pretty successful. We all have careers and stuff like that. But like personally, I still feel like there's so much that I would like to have done at this point in time. And even with us, like personally launching the podcast, I feel like that's great. But I'm still so far from where I want to be. And like the time is ticking. Like we don't have forever for that. And so like the time that we say, well, the saying that we have time to figure out because we're young, like it's true. It's equal parts truth and lie, I feel like. And it's an illusion that fades fairly quickly. Because if we keep putting off things, then eventually we're not gonna have time to get things done. And so like, if you have any kind of meaningful destination or place to be, whether it be a career goal, or you want a certain type of relationship or a certain type of life you create for yourself, then the choices that you do make, they are of consequence and they do matter. So there's three kinds of choices really. There's choices that are either going to move you towards that, choices that are non-consequential, or choices that are going to move you away from it. And what I've seen through the people that I've listened to speak through podcasts and read their books and just interact with people on a day-to-day basis is that most successful people, they find a way to minimize the amount of choices they make to move them away from the goals and maximize the ones that move them closer to it. And it really puts it in a perspective, because I mean, 25 years, that flew by super quick. And like, just as soon as it came from going from being 20 to 25, then it's 25 to 30, and then the same things, the same mistakes we were making at age 20, they aren't so cute when you're 30 years old, and they're of higher consequence. So if you're thinking like, if you have goals, I think that one of the biggest things that people in our 20s do is a disservice to ourselves. We don't get started on things, and it's not saying that you have to have everything completely figured out, because you don't. We don't. I don't. No one does. But just the fact that you should be working on something, like even if let's say professionally you're able to get something done, there's maybe other facets of your life that you're trying to work on that aren't exactly in line or perfected yet, but there needs to be some kind of work in order to get that, because these things don't appear by themselves. Anything worth having, you have to work for. And so I think after my early 20s, there's like a really renewed sense of urgency, because someone as myself, very early on, I was getting tons of praise from my parents, from teachers, from people around me for accomplishing things and doing things around me. And so I guess it was kind of like, it wasn't, I don't think I use it as a means of self-validation, but I think I really set the bar for myself really high, because I wanted to keep continuously achieving things. And when things weren't coming fast enough, as like ODU, for example, like I graduated with my Bachelor of Science, Computer Science degree, but I graduated a semester behind because I changed my major because I panicked. And I ended up switching back to computer science, but the moral of the story is like, it wasn't fast enough for me. Like just the fact that I was finishing a semester later, like I just wanted to walk with my friends like across there and be accomplished at the same exact time that they were. Not that my degree would be worth any more whether I graduated in May or December. Like nobody gives a damn. I have a degree. But that fact was eating me up inside. And it was something that I really didn't like talking about. Like around like my last year at OD, I really didn't like talking about school, for that matter, because I felt like I was underachieving where I should be at.
Right, I can feel you on that, just based off of the expectations. But I'm not gonna lie, I graduated 2 years later than what I was supposed to. Like all of my friends graduated on time, 2016. I didn't graduate. I walked May of 2018, but I wasn't done with my degree until August of 2018. Like, I think the biggest advice, and I think it's probably the most cliche, is like everybody moves on their own time. Like we think because we've been conditioned through the grade school all the way up to high school, is that you just have to keep accomplishing something. Like you got to get to the next grade on time. You got to get to the next grade on time. And because I think we, as children at the time, started clowning our peers that got held back a grade or anything like that, we started viewing that stuff in a negative light. But then when I look at my story compared to, my best friends that, one ran track at Hampton and then the other one graduated with his bachelor's in criminal justice at Norfolk State, I was just thinking like, that's their story, that's their journey. Like I get in the chapters our paths intertwine and they're, forever linked together, but it's like, that's their story. Like my own book itself is going to be completely different than theirs. Like their stories are going to consist of work, party, and things of that nature. My story consists of relationship, early parenthood, and then, a whole bunch of mental, turmoil, I guess you could say. Like I was really trying to find myself, and the fact that I literally did it 2 years later in comparison to the average age people in America get their bachelor's degree being 29, like I still took that as a win, because I'm still ahead of the curve. Like even though you have bumps, you're still in the grand scheme of things ahead of the curve. And I think that is what allowed me to talk about myself freely, because I honestly didn't care. I was like, it's like once you get past your 20s, like everything stops becoming a race, and that's when it transitions into a marathon. Like you just go at your own pace. Like you're still gonna get to the finish line. You just might get to the finish line a little bit later as a long distance runner than you would as somebody that's running a full sprint. And I think what people will find is when you're that marathon runner, you're able to handle stressful situations a lot easier than somebody that is just sprinting through life and consistently, accomplishing things or hitting, goals. Because yeah, there might be a so much emphasis on accomplishing that stuff, but how does that same person fare when it comes to you need to have these talks about emotion, or how are these things faring when people need to start talking about how you deal with loss? How are these people faring when need to start talking about mental health? Like, those people deal with it the same way. I think that their way of escaping it is to continue running that 40-yard dash rather than actually sitting back and saying, all right, I'm gonna burn out at some point. Like, everything I'm running from or everything that I'm trying to accomplish to keep getting that dopamine hit is eventually going to hit you at one point. No ifs, ands, or buts. Like, that childhood trauma, even though you might be hitting every single month, you might have graduated from your 4 year in 3 years, and then you graduated, from got your doctor's degree, you're a doctor or you're a lawyer of some sort. Like, that childhood trauma is still there. If you haven't truly addressed it yet, it might not come out at that point, but when you have your children, or when you're getting later in your life and you're starting to realize that you talk to your children in the same way, whoever committed such act to you, like, then that's when that stuff really starts to come back and haunt you. Like, there's reasons why we all have our own past. It's because we weren't designed to just be robots per se. Like, we were designed to have our own unique responses to any given situation.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it was like that in Brian's case, but of course, we used to talk about being teased because the kids were being held back a grade. I think that's just the stigma. Like, people don't want that. Like, oh man, I need to stay on track. You know what I mean? It's just that stigma,
Yeah.
But yeah, in Brian's case, he kind of helped me transition right to the question I wanted to ask, because I wanted to ask, was the first thing you guys feel is important for a person in their early 20s to learn, like, right ahead? And I think what Brian was alluding to was great, because I would say it's important for people to, like, implement action, but also learn patience, because I think Brian had that action. He wanted to implement the action, but he didn't have enough patience to stay with his major and not, like, switch and everything like that. So not to use that example, but yeah. But yeah, just learn patience. And I believe a lot of people in their early 20s like shy away from taking certain chances due to lack of knowledge or like fear of consequences. And that could be going to college, not going to college, or even starting that business they always thought about. But the thing is, like, acquiring the knowledge in order to be successful at said goal. Right. So, and that's where learning patience comes in also, because you have to learn to be patient when trying to acquire the right amount of knowledge, because nothing is mastered in one day. Like Wakanda wasn't built in a day. Like, you gotta make sure you have the right knowledge. Like, even something like depression, like, you're not gonna get over depression in one day. This necessary steps you got to take in order to get to that point. And even if you do get to that point, like, relapses happen. So, but it's just about consistency, really.
What you were saying about the action and then having the plan and patience is like, you don't really get to choose the fact whether or not there's going to be consequences. There's always going to be consequences to our action or inaction for that matter. But by taking action and dictating according to our plan, we have the ability to choose them.
Exactly.
But in terms of the most valuable thing that someone could learn right off the bat in their 20s, like going in from their 20th birthday. Des, do you have an immediate answer for that? I think I need a second to think about that.
I would say either learn a skill or I think it's kind of what you said. I just think of it as a different light, like learn how to handle loss. Not loss in the sense of like, loved ones, but learn how to handle loss to, like, if the relationship is failing, let it go.
Move on.
Yeah, like, people, we have this sense that we need to prove our worth to somebody or prove our worth to ourselves through, things that aren't built for you to prove yourself through. Like, you're not going to prove your self-worth through a relationship. You prove your self-worth by sticking to your script and, standing behind what you truly believe in. And then I say learn a skill because America as a setup isn't truly, it's not set up for middle class, offsprings to go to college. Like, unless you are going in on like a scholarship of some sort, or you're able to get those stipends. Like, college is probably one of the most stressful times of your life, but it's the most fun because you learn how to cope with stress through, certain activities. Like, I think that's the easiest way I could put it, because I say learn a skill because you want to learn how to make money without necessarily having to clock in for somebody. So bringing everything full circle, that skill is going to be, when you're in college, the difference maker between Chic-Fil-A or ramen noodles. It's going to be the difference maker between being able to eat out, maybe once or twice a week, in comparison to once every 3 or 4 months when you go back home. Like that's the difference I make, because I remember, I can't tell you how many times like I would look at my gaslight working and going to school full time, or looking at my dash and seeing my gaslight on in my car because I'm going to school full time, and I only have but so much amount of time to work, but then I also have to commute to ODU because I'm still living at home, and that's like it's a 30-40 minute drive from my house. So it's like I was 110% dependent on this job, and this job was how I paid my car note, how I put gas in the car, how I got the assistance I need to eat, drink, do whatever. And it was just like, if you know a skill that can get you money without having to go to mom and dad all the time or struggle, I say do it. Like one of my best friends, Devin, like he started off at TCC with us. He graduated a year after me. He started at TCC with us, and he just said it's not for me. And then went and got his went to apprenticeship, still got his associates through the apprenticeship, and now he's making $70,000-$80,000 a year, while we're still dealing with student debt and a little bit of instability, just because coming out into the job market straight out of high school without like any true profession acquired through your bachelor's degree, like it's hard. Like it's not set up for people to come outside of your 4-year without a profession in mind. Like I think computer science is a great degree to have to come out and make decent money. I think maybe, I don't know, anything within the sciences or in the mathematics or in the business realm, those are great degrees. But if you're like criminal justice, or if you're political science, or anything that requires a heightened degree, whether it be master's or doctorate, like you're gonna struggle when you come outside of it. So I think that skill is what offsets the stress due to struggling.
Now that I've had some time to think about that, I totally agree with what you're saying. If you look at like people from our demographic, typically we do see higher rates of them inside of like those majors that you were saying that have higher barriers for entry for professionalism. But my answer to what the biggest thing that somebody in their 20s could possibly take with them is have a plan. Like just because plans can change, but the fact that you do have something penciled in gives you something to work with. Otherwise, like you're a piece of plankton in the ocean current. You're just getting blown around. You don't have any kind of direction whatsoever. But if you do have some resemblance of a strategy, you can at least have some kind of saying what direction you're going in. But one thing, I have an answer to this question, but I want to hear what you guys have to say first. What do you think is the biggest pitfall that people make in their early 20s in terms of what realm they tend to do the most damage to themselves in, that impacts them lifelong?
Thinking that they know everything and being too prideful to take advice. Because I say that to say this, like, I don't know about you guys, but I know for me and my friends, we really didn't want to ever hear what mom and dad had to say. Like, point blank period. Like
in your 20s or just in general?
In general, like but it was heightened in its 20s. Like, what I'll say is, mom and dad typically, and I'm not gonna say this for everybody because not every set of parents have achieved what they truly want out of life. But for example, my parents have achieved a lot. My mom is, a 2% or 3% in the Navy. She just put on captain. Like, there's not a lot of Black African American women in the Navy that are captains. Like, she's really accomplished. My dad, retired lieutenant commander, saying like they've accomplished a lot. He has his own business. He's successful. For me, I'm so prideful to like, all right, I'm looking at it as competition. Now I got to go through this life to be able to be in the same sentence as them. And what that competition did, or what that competition did for me, it blinded me from the gems that they were giving me at a young age. Like, I really was just so far into my own realm to where I wanted to be in competition with them 30 years too soon rather than, you know, realizing that they're giving me, you know, the breadcrumbs or the cement to start to form my foundation, instead of me, you know, just going out and doing whatever I thought was right at the time and just hoping that it went somewhere with it.
That's crazy. I've seen that firsthand. Like, I've experienced it when I was younger. Like, it's funny how my parents got smarter the older I got. And me and my dad joke about that, because it's like when you're young, you feel like, oh, mom and dad, they're so dumb. They don't understand anything. They don't know what they're talking about. But as you're older, like, I see my parents as more peers, and a lot of things that they had been telling me earlier on in life, they become more and more true as I began to grow and experience those things. But I've also seen friends of mine who have like brilliant parents, and they give, like you were saying, dropping gems to them on a consistent basis. You were raised in the same household as them. Like, they're giving you a blueprint for success, but just don't want to listen to them. And I think I really understand it, but I don't at the same time. And it's just like when I'm around them and I hear the advice that they give and stuff like that, I'm able to take it and apply it or see how it would be practical. And I mean, it's from a parent's perspective, it has to be disheartening, because you're giving them a blueprint, you're showing them, but because of one reason or another, not able to be receptive of it. But like what you were saying, as you got older, it came full circle, and it started to resonate more. So you don't feel like you're in competition or anything like that.
I still feel like there's a bit of a competition, because that's just, my mom is really competitive. My dad is really competitive. My dad is more or less like, he's not competitive in the sense to where I got to be better than you. He's competitive in the sense to where like, I deserve a seat at the table type competitiveness. Like, that's the easiest way I can say. I know what my issue was like social acceptance. Like, man, the gems your parents really dropped for you, it's not something you can go and tell your friends and everybody else resonates with it. Like, you know, you might be looked at in the sense of you're just too deep, or you know, you're not on the same wavelength of everybody else. Like, I think social acceptance is a really big stigma for, you know, your late teens and early 20s. That can be, you know, the difference between you picking up on things really quickly or you having to learn things because you've been hit across the head, you know, a certain amount of times. Like, for me, I think I'm in a good state because when I had my son, everything came full circle. Like, I didn't necessarily get to, you know, put everything out on the vision board or start painting the picture, but everything just combusted. And then as soon as like I had that moment in my life where everything started to make sense, I was able to finally put things on the board and like, all right, this is what I can do. This is what I have to do. And then just put everything in motion. Like, that's how it goes.
No, this
the
is the
knowledge they give you. The knowledge they give you, it doesn't fall to deaf ears. It's just not what you want to hear at that given time.
Right. Now, this is a metaphorical vision board, right?
Yeah.
Or did you
I was actually
one?
talking to my mom 2 weeks about or last week about that, though. I was like, you know, now that I have like everything set up the way I want it, as far as like just my space, I want to get like because the section in my room to where there's nothing there. It's probably like 6 feet in length. And then of course all of our ceilings are all our walls are like 9 feet. I just want to get like a revision board, and I can have a section for me and a section for me. So, you know, however long pandemic, you know, goes, like everything is there, because I think we're brilliant in thought, but I think that because we only keep it in thought and in theory, we never truly get the chance to apply it, because that thought is only good with something. Like, you have the most brilliant thought, you're not writing it down, or because you can't remember it, time to apply it or do the work, then it's a thought that just slips into the abyss like all the other brilliant have.
Right. And the thing about actually putting it down into some kind of tangible format is you can't deny that. And it's kind of like it's a judge, really. Like, if you don't write anything down, or if you don't have a vision board, if you don't share with anybody or don't actually commit to it, you can always say, oh, it was just a thought or just an idea, and you can push it off further and further and further. But the fact that it's out there is like a constant reminder.
In fact, I think the vision board is very, very like key for people that are like me. I lose the desire to do things when I speak about it too much. Mm-hmm. Like that dopamine hit that you get when you're doing something good, you get that same dopamine hit that you would receive when you accomplish something. But when you are saying it to somebody, when you're telling somebody what you want to do, you're envisioning yourself walking across the stage, getting your Juris Doctorate, or you're envisioning yourself, you know, closing on your first house that you want to, you know, flip or something like that. And you just lose the desire to do it because you've spoken it so much you haven't necessarily manifested how you're going to do it. You've only manifested what you think you're going to do. And it fatigues you. I don't know if people realize it or not, but it fatigues you. Like for me, the one thing that I have gone through with law school is like when I'm getting ready to take the test, everybody wants to talk about it. And because everybody wants to talk about it, I lose the desire to like do it. So when I told my mom, I was like, this is what I'm gonna do, but we'll talk about it when I do it, not before I get a chance to actually start doing it. Like we're gonna talk about it while I'm doing it, so then I can get the necessary advice I need. Like I don't want to start speaking on things and trying to manifest things because of an end result. I want to be able to manifest everything because I'm truly in love with the cycle everything goes through. Like I want to enjoy the late night studying because I know there's going to be a point to where I'm not going to be doing it anymore. I think we just fall in love with the dream so much that we forget all the hard work that has to go to accomplish something. That's just me though. Like I can tell you firsthand, it's like when I talk about something too much, I just lose the desire to do it. When it's just locked in my mind, or if I can look at it and remind myself without anybody knowing, it's just like that. It's going to be that enjoyment of accomplishing something and then saying, look what I did. Like you thought I wasn't doing anything, but here we are. I have the results to prove for it. Like that's my type of drive.
I kind of like oftentimes I don't use this method, but I kind of do like the fact of having like an external accountability partner, like somebody like Dondre we've had on here before.
Yeah.
If you're one of Dondre's friends, you tell him about a goal or something that you are a standard or something that you want to accomplish, Dondre is on your ass about it. You better get it done. Like he's gonna remind you. I like that.
Yeah, that's what my god brother is, and I appreciate it because I know there's people out there that need that and don't have it. But I just know what drives me internally is just working in silence and then producing a result.
Right. I mean, I can see the merit to that too. I'm very careful about who I share my plans with, and I do value the people in my life like Dondre who are there, and I can actually give them my plans for the future and certain ideas to balance within. I mean, like I said, he holds me accountable. Josh, is that something that have you ever experienced that, to where if you talk about one of your goals or something that you're working on too much, then you lose the drive to do it?
Not lose the drive, but I do have I guess a little, I don't like doing it because I do have this, like, I guess this fear of things not producing how they is, like you know how it is, like so
the expectation.
Yeah, the expectation. So I feel like in Desmond's case, if I was bragging about like taking a test in order to like go into law school, something like that, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm about to take this test, and if I don't pass and shit, then I'm have to go, what happened to the test? Oh, you know, I ain't take that yet. You know how it is. So yeah, I really don't like to do it because of just that fear of that negative consequences that could happen, and then I'm looking stupid in the end. That's really how that is with me. But as far as keep going.
So not the fear of the failure itself, but the consequence of the failure.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is like the fact that you don't want the accountability from other people because you know that that's going to be there on the other side if you don't hit it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
But your question as far as like what is the pitfall? Or like
biggest pitfall that people in their 20s make? It's another second part to it. So that have the biggest implications for long down the line.
I guess I can answer that too, but I think we touched on it a little bit. I think it's just it's a variety of things too, but I think it's just the inability to move on and learn from such situation. Like no matter if it's like family issues, relationships, and like I feel a lot of people don't look at themselves at the end of something and try to reevaluate themselves. They'd rather just look at the other person or look at something else and blame it on them. So really it's just like the inability to learn from whatever it is and or move on, whether it's like a relationship, trauma, or anything like that. Because if you learn from something, there's better chance that you can avoid it in the next scenario that it could come up. So that's really, I feel, really the biggest thing, just inability to move on or learn, because that can haunt you. That can, if you end up having kids, like you can spread it to your kids as you get older. Then next thing you know, you're a grandmother, grandfather, 35 or some shit, and like, come on. So yeah, it's just like the inability to learn and move on too, but mainly like the inability to learn.
what you were saying about reassessing yourself, and not a lot of people want to do that. I mean, I see that a lot, but I like when I figure out that I'm the problem in a situation, because that means that I can fix that. I can change something that I'm doing wrong, but if the world is wrong or if somebody else is doing something wrong, I can't change that. That's something external.
You don't like when you're the problem, Des? Why you laugh?
Oh no, it was funny. He says I enjoy like when I am the problem. That's,
like, I don't like being problematic. I don't want to misconstrue that whatsoever. But if there is something that I'm not getting a desired outcome for, I like for it to be a consequence of some behavior that I can manipulate and change in order to get me where I want to be. I don't like to be in a situation to where, regardless of my actions, the consequence is going to be the same. It's not going to be a desired outcome for myself. That's what I meant by I like when I'm the problem. My answer for the biggest pitfall in the early 20s is, I think, how people handle their relationships with other people. Because you see, like, a lot of the damage that people do to themselves are the consequence of relationships. And if you get in them with the wrong people, that people are more than willing to ruin your life if you let them. Like, I've worked with people for years now who have told me about how, you know, they have children with certain people and they end up being maneuvered as pawns in that game. Or then you see people who, through the lack of ability to move on properly and process things, they end up with long-standing mental health issues, like with your dependence of your self-worth on that person, and then you don't have that person all of a sudden. So then, like, it throws you for a spiral, and if you don't have the healthy coping mechanisms and outlets and the ability to process that, like, you end up passing stuff like that down to your children, like you said, Josh. So I think that's anything that really affects your psyche has the ability to magnify itself once you start bringing children to the equation, because you're passing things down, and then they're suffering for things they have no idea why mom was this way or why dad was that way. And I think that's negligence in its purest form. Like, that's super selfish, because you're starting them out at a disadvantage by not properly addressing things or giving them the optimal platform to start launching their life off of. But just the reason I went with relationships, just because I feel like that's where most people's pain comes from, and we look at them as something that we just do. We don't have any kind of real intention.
No, I definitely agree with that. To a T, I think we kind of have already spoken on that to an extent, kind of, you know, negligence of self when it comes to other people. Oftentimes, like, that can be the formation of that depression, anxiety, or whatever, not just in yourself, but potentially with the other person as well. I think for me though, like, coming to that realization, because I think we all hear like baby mama drama, baby daddy drama, like, coming to that realization so quickly allowed myself and my son's mom to be like closer friends than what we were during the relationship. Like, it's strength, and there's a lot of strength in knowing when you're the problem. It's even more strength when in taking the necessary steps to make sure that you're accountable for those problems. Like, everybody just likes to look at the end result rather than all the stuff that started from, you know, B all the way to Y. Like, you're only looking at A and Z. What about the other ones? What about all those other, you know, letters within the alphabet that make up the full 26, that make up your full story with that person? And I think when I did that, man, it made everything a lot easier. Like, I was able to come out, like, there's things that I've said and I've been like, you know what? Like, yeah, I was mad, but I really meant it at the time. Like, I got to have accountability for my actions. And all I've done is like, okay. And I've actually used it to a T. Like, it's been great, and when I see it in practice, because I'll catch myself when, you know, a couple of the guys I play, you know, Xbox with, they'll say something stupid, and I'll type out this elaborate, detailed message to say, no, you're wrong. But if somebody doesn't know they're wrong, or they don't know that they're the reason
why do it.
Exactly. So I like me setting my boundaries for knowing what conversations to engage in and to, you know, bypass. Like, it's, like I said, that happiness is a byproduct of the boundaries you set, because I could have literally got into that argument with that person, and it could have thrown my whole day off, because I would have been mad that I'm trying to impose my own perspective on somebody else's perspective when they're not meant to mesh.
Yeah, I find that I do that a lot on Instagram. I feel when I see stupid shit on Instagram, I'll be like, never mind. What's the point? No, I don't need to do this. What am I doing?
I catch myself so frequently. Like I'll be typing, I'll be like, I'll just be going. I'll be like, is this message really gonna be?
Yeah, is this gonna benefit me? Yeah, is this really gonna?
How does it benefit me?
Yeah,
doesn't.
It's not.
And then I just keep moving.
Yeah,
and it's like it never happened.
Yeah, wait, I didn't see that. Forget it. Yeah. You gonna say something, bro?
Yeah, I don't do that. Like, I don't get me wrong. I see stupid shit online all the time, and so like the impulse is you want to say something, but I know, like, I think about the outcome of it. So what you were saying, Desmond, like the person, if that's their perspective, what's the likelihood you change their mind? So let's say I do write the message, and we go back and forth for a little while. But more commonly, if you're right, the person is just gonna not respond. So it's like you did all that for nothing. So like one of the things my dad told me, he said people don't like you when you're right or when you start to make sense. So like if somebody's saying something like off the wall, completely abstract, makes no sense and ignorant, and then you present some logic that you've thought about and carefully constructed into your little however many characters a tweet allows you for, and then you post it. That doesn't mean shit if they ignore it. Like you're not gonna change anyone's life with that. So I look at like the risk and the reward. So I'm going to spend a few minutes to write this message and send it off to where it's gonna be ill received. They don't care, or I could just get off, or you can keep doing whatever I was doing before. And so I would say damn near 100% of the time I do the latter option, which is just keep doing what I was doing, unless it's somebody like I'm actually in my immediate hemisphere to where I can't have a conversation. But then that's a different situation entirely because they're more receptive to it.
Yeah, and they could be trolls anyway, so they could just be like trying to get on. You can make the best point possible. Right. You can just be like, yeah, it don't matter, Trump is the best. I'm like, wait, what? What are you talking about? What is it? Where did that even come from? What? So yeah, there's no point. Like, I always think about the end goal is like, what's the chance that you really gonna change this person's mind? From the internet too. But yeah, come on. So, yeah. Exactly. Anything else you guys want to add?
I'm happy to be back, guys.
Yeah, it's good. Good discussion. I'm gonna be honest with you. I forgot how to end it, but album of the week. Yes.
My album of the week, because I knew he was about to ask. It's another Larry June mixtape. I think they released on that album. I don't think people really do mixtape, but it's "Keep Going" by Larry June and Harry Fraud. You know me, I like music that I could drive to, music that can take my mind off stuff. So. That's it.
All right, cool. All right, guys. If you guys like the discussion, don't forget to hit the like button. And we're going to see you guys next week. Peace.
But while you're here, be sure to check out other great content from the Breakdown crew, including previous episodes of the podcast, Joshua versus Movies, Joshua versus Music, and of course, haven't forgotten about my plant lovers, Feel the Love. Just check out this begonia.